I thought it was just another farmer driving across the neighboring field until the lights stopped in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't a road out there, no engine, no sound, and whoever was holding that light spent nearly 3 hours staring directly at my house. I live on a small farm in eastern Montana. The closest neighbor is over a mile away. After sunset, the entire place disappears into darkness. No traffic, no streetlights, no city glow on the horizon, just wind, fields, and silence. When my wife and I bought the property, it felt like paradise. We wanted peace, a slower life, somewhere to raise our kids away from the city. For the first few weeks, everything was exactly what we'd hoped for. Then, the lights appeared. The first time I saw one, I assumed it belonged to another farmer checking his land. A bright white light, far out in the field beyond our fence. It stayed there for a few minutes, then disappeared. I didn't think much of it. The next night, it came back. Same place, same time, around 11:30 p.m. It wasn't moving. It wasn't sweeping across the ground like a flashlight. It simply stayed there, perfectly still, almost like someone was standing in complete darkness, pointing the light straight toward our house. I watched it for a minute, then went back inside. A few nights later, I mentioned it to my wife. She barely looked up from her book. It's probably one of the neighbors. That's what I wanted to believe too, but something about it felt wrong. There wasn't a road leading to that part of the field, not even a dirt trail, and the nearest house farm in that direction was almost 3 miles away. About a week later, the light appeared again. This time, I grabbed my binoculars. I stood on the porch for almost 15 minutes trying to make out who was holding it. The strange thing was, I couldn't see a person, only the light. It was almost as if the darkness behind it swallowed everything else. No silhouette, no movement, just a bright white beam aimed at my property. The next morning, I drove over to my nearest neighbor, an older rancher named Bill. He'd lived there for over 30 years. I asked him if anyone worked the fields late at night. He looked at me for a second, then asked, "Was the light moving?" I shook my head. No. His expression changed. He leaned against the fence and quietly said, "Then don't go looking for it." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh back. Instead, he said, "Out here, if you see lights where there shouldn't be lights, leave them alone." That answer stayed with me all day. I kept thinking about it. Maybe Bill was just trying to scare the new guy. Maybe he'd heard too many local stories. That night, I decided I'd prove it was nothing. At exactly 11:27 p.m., the light appeared again. Same location, only this time it seemed closer. Not much, maybe 50 yards, but definitely closer than before. I walked out onto the porch. The cold air hit my face immediately. I stared at it. The light didn't move, it didn't flicker, it didn't sway in the wind. It remained perfectly still, watching. Or at least, it felt like it was watching. After nearly 20 minutes, the light suddenly disappeared. No fading, no movement, it was simply gone. I finally relaxed. Maybe whoever it was had left. I turned around to head back inside. Then my German Shepherd started barking. Not toward the field, toward the barn. He never barked without a reason. His ears were pinned back. The hair along his spine stood straight up. He wasn't acting aggressive. He looked terrified. I grabbed my flashlight, shined it toward the barn. Nothing. Just the old wooden doors swaying gently in the wind. I told myself the dog had probably smelled a coyote, locked the back door, and went to bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound outside my bedroom window, a single metallic clang, like someone had dropped a tool onto concrete. I looked outside. Nothing. The yard was empty. The barn stood exactly where it always had. Silent, dark. I almost climbed back into bed until I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The light was no longer out in the field. It was standing right beside my barn. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that light standing beside the barn, perfectly still, almost waiting. When the sun finally came up, I walked outside. The grass was soaked with dew. Everything looked normal. The barn doors were still shut. The animals were quiet. For a moment, I felt ridiculous. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe there really had been someone walking across the property. I walked around the barn anyway. Nothing. No footprints, no tire tracks, no broken fence, nothing that suggested anyone had been there. Except, near the side wall, I noticed something lying in the dirt. A disposable flashlight. Cheap. Plastic. The batteries were missing. That evening, I installed 2 trail cameras, one facing the barn, the other aimed toward the field where the light always appeared. If someone was trespassing, I'd finally have proof. The cameras were motion activated. They would record automatically. That night, nothing happened. The next night, nothing. By the third night, I started thinking the whole thing was over. Then, at 11:34 p.m., my phone vibrated. Motion detected. Barn camera. I opened the app immediately. The screen was dark. The infrared image slowly loaded. At first, I couldn't see anything. Then, a bright white light suddenly appeared, not shining toward the camera, but directly behind it. The image became washed out, almost completely white. The recording lasted 12 seconds. When the light disappeared, the barn door was slightly open. I knew for a fact I'd locked it before dinner. I grabbed my shotgun, called my neighbor Bill. He answered on the second ring. "I think someone's inside my barn." There was a long pause. Then he said, "I'm on my way." He arrived about 15 minutes later. We searched the barn together. Every stall, every storage room, every corner. Nothing. No one. The only strange thing was that one of the upstairs hayloft windows was open. I never opened those windows, especially at night. Bill stood quietly for a moment, then pointed his flashlight toward the ladder leading up to the loft. Dust. I looked closer. Fresh footprints. Not boot prints. Bare footprints. Someone had walked through the dust without wearing shoes. They led to the window, then stopped. No prints coming back, no way down, nothing. It was as if whoever made them had simply disappeared. The sheriff came out the next morning. He looked around the property, checked the fence, reviewed the camera footage. He couldn't explain the light, or the open barn door, or the footprints. His only advice was simple: lock everything and call us immediately if you see anyone again. For the next week, nothing happened. No lights, no strange noises, no alerts. I finally started relaxing. Then, one Friday night, the power went out. The entire property went black. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The wind had completely died. Everything was silent. Too silent. Then, one light appeared. Not in the field this time, not near the barn. It was standing right beside my mailbox, less than 100 feet from the house, perfectly still. I couldn't see the person holding it, only the light, watching me. Neither of us moved. 30 seconds. 1 minute. 2 minutes. It never came closer. It never turned away. Then, without warning, the light switched off. The darkness swallowed everything. I stood there, listening. That's when I heard it. A single footstep. Not near the mailbox. Behind me. inside the yard. The footstep came from somewhere behind me, not from the road, not from the field, from inside my own backyard. I spun around, shining my flashlight across the grass. Nothing. The beams swept over the fence, the shed, the old oak tree. Everything looked exactly the way it always had. But my dog, he wasn't barking anymore. He was standing at the back door, completely frozen, staring toward the barn. He refused to move. Bill was still parked outside my property. I yelled his name. He came running with his flashlight. What happened? I heard someone. We searched the backyard together. Again, nothing. Until Bill stopped walking. He pointed his flashlight toward the mud beside the barn. There, fresh footprints, bare feet, the same size we'd seen upstairs a week earlier. This time, they didn't lead toward the barn. They led away from it, straight toward my house. Then, they disappeared, about 15 feet from my back porch. There was no concrete, no gravel, just soft mud. The prints simply ended. Bill looked at me. "We're calling the sheriff." Again, the deputies arrived 40 minutes later. They photographed the footprints, measured them, searched every inch of the property. One deputy walked nearly half a mile into the fields with a thermal camera. Nothing. No heat signatures, no one hiding, no vehicle tracks, nothing. Before leaving, one of the deputies asked me something strange. "Have you noticed anything missing?" I thought about it. "No." He nodded. "Sometimes people don't break in to steal. They just like knowing they can." That sentence stayed with me. The following weekend, I decided to install 4 more cameras, one in the barn, one facing the driveway, one covering the backyard, and one overlooking the fields. If someone came back, I'd finally catch them. 3 nights later, at exactly 11:31 p.m., every camera sent an alert at the same time. Motion detected. I opened the app. The driveway camera, nothing. The backyard camera, nothing. The barn camera, nothing. Then I opened the field camera. The light was back, exactly where it had first appeared, far out in the darkness, completely still. I switched to the backyard camera again. Nothing. Then something caught my eye. The timestamp. It was 2 seconds behind the field camera. I switched back, then back again. That's when I realized the light wasn't moving. The cameras were. One after another, every camera on my property slowly turned, as if someone was manually rotating them, until every single one was facing my house. Not the field, not the barn, my house. I ran outside. The yard was empty, but every camera above me had been turned at the exact same angle, looking directly at my bedroom window. I didn't sleep that night. The sheriff's office reviewed the footage. They couldn't explain it. There was no sign of anyone climbing the camera poles, no fingerprints, no damage, nothing. One deputy suggested strong wind, except there hadn't been any wind that night. 2 weeks later, my wife told me she couldn't live there anymore. She was constantly checking the windows, jumping at every sound. Even the kids had started asking why the flashlight man came every night. That was enough. We put the farm up for sale. It took almost 4 months before someone bought it. On the day we moved out, Bill helped load the last trailer. Before leaving, he handed me a folded piece of paper. "I found this in my grandfather's things," he said. "It mentions your property." It was an old newspaper clipping from 1978. The headline read, "Local search called off after farmhand vanishes." According to the article, the young farmhand had disappeared while checking strange lights reported in the fields late at night. His flashlight was found standing upright in the middle of an empty field, still switched on. His footprints ended abruptly, as if he'd simply vanished. His body was never found. I still own that newspaper clipping. I keep it in a drawer, not because I believe in ghost stories, but because of something that happened 6 months after we moved. The new owners contacted me. They wanted to ask a question, just one. The husband sounded embarrassed. He paused before he said it. "I know this is going to sound crazy." He paused, then asked, "Did you ever notice a light in the field around 11:30 at night?" I didn't answer right away, because I already knew exactly which light he was talking about.